The pregnant Omega was mocked at the royal ball, until the Alpha King rose and claimed her again. The great hall of Velmore Castle glowed with 1,000 candles that night. Silk gowns swept across polished marble floors, and laughter echoed beneath high golden ceilings. It was the night of the royal ball, the most important event of the year, when every noble family in the kingdom gathered to see and be seen. Elira stood near the entrance, her heart pounding so hard she feared everyone could hear it. She had not planned to come. For months she had hidden herself away in a small cottage at the edge of the northern woods, far from the court that once called her family. But tonight, something inside her had refused to stay silent any longer. She wore a simple grey dress, nothing like the jeweled gowns around her. Her hands rested gently over the curve of her belly, round and unmistakable. She was carrying a child, and the whole kingdom would soon know it. Whispers began, before she had even taken 10 steps into the hall. Is that her? The Omega the king cast out? How dare she show her face here, and in that condition? Elira kept her chin lifted, though her knees trembled beneath her skirts. She had promised herself she would not run, not this time. 6 months earlier, her life had been very different. She had been the king's chosen Omega, the woman everyone believed would soon become queen. King Draven, ruler of Velmore, had chosen her not for politics or wealth, but because he loved her. Their bond had been the talk of the entire kingdom, admired and envied in equal measure. Then, one terrible night, everything changed. Guards had come to her chambers with accusations of betrayal, claiming she had been unfaithful, that she had conspired against the crown with a neighboring kingdom. Letters were shown to her, letters she had never written, sealed with a forged version of her own signature. Before she could even speak in her own defense, she was stripped of her title and quietly escorted from the castle grounds in the dead of night, told never to return. She had believed, in her darkest hours, that Draven himself had ordered it, that perhaps he had grown tired of her, and this was simply the easiest way to be rid of her without scandal. The pain of that belief had nearly broken her, but she had not broken, and now, months later, with new life growing inside her, she had finally found the courage to come back and face the court that had humiliated her. She had barely reached the center of the hall when a woman's voice rose above the crowd, sharp and delighted with cruelty. Well, look who has crawled back. Elira turned to see Lady Vashti approaching, dressed in deep crimson, her smile like a blade wrapped in silk. Vashti had always wanted what Elira had. Now, with Elira gone from court for months, she had positioned herself as the leading candidate to become the king's new mate. I wonder, Vashti continued, loud enough for the entire hall to hear, whose child that could possibly be. Surely not our king's. He cast you out for treachery, did he not? Or perhaps, she added, her eyes glittering with malice, you simply could not resist finding comfort elsewhere, while you hid in your little cottage. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not everyone joined in, but enough did, that the sound of it struck Elira like a slap. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, and tears burned behind her eyes, but she forced herself to stand still. I have done nothing wrong, Elira said quietly, though her voice shook. Of course you would say that, Vashti replied, stepping closer. Liars always do. Tell me, does the child even have a father who will claim it, or will you raise it alone, in shame, the way you deserve? More laughter. Someone near the back called out something cruel about her grey dress, comparing it to a servant's rags. Another voice suggested she be escorted out before she embarrassed herself further. Elira felt the walls of the hall pressing in on her, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, all of them judging, all of them certain of her guilt. She thought of turning and leaving, of disappearing back into the night as quietly as she had once been forced to leave. It would have been easier. It would have hurt less. But then she thought of the child within her, and of the truth she carried, and she found one last thread of strength. I will not run from lies, she said, louder this time, though her voice still trembled. Not anymore. Vashti's smile widened, cruel and confident. She opened her mouth to speak again, ready to deliver another blow. That was when the great doors at the far end of the hall swung open. Every head turned. The music, which had continued softly throughout the confrontation, stopped entirely. A hush fell so complete that Elira could hear her own heartbeat. King Draven stood in the doorway. He was dressed simply for a king, in dark blue and silver, no crown upon his head, as though he had come not as a ruler, but as a man with something urgent to do. His eyes swept across the hall once, taking in the scene, the crowd gathered around Elira, the mockery still hanging in the air like smoke. Then his gaze found her, and everything else in the room seemed to fall away. He crossed the hall in long, purposeful strides. Nobles stepped aside instinctively, clearing a path. Vashti's smile faltered, then vanished entirely, as the king walked past her, without so much as a glance, his attention fixed entirely on Elira. He stopped before her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Elira searched his face, looking for anger, for coldness, for anything that might confirm the fears that had haunted her for months. Instead, she found only relief, and beneath it, something that looked almost like grief. "Elira," he said softly, "I have searched for you since the night you disappeared." Confusion crossed her face. "You searched for me? But you were the one who—" "No," his voice was firm now, carrying easily across the silent hall. "I gave no such order. I would never have let you go." He knelt then, right there on the marble floor, in front of every noble in the kingdom. A king, kneeling before an Omega, the court had just moments ago called a liar and worse. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That night," Draven continued, "I was called away on urgent matters at the border. When I returned 2 days later, I was told you had confessed to treason and fled the castle in shame. I did not believe it. I have not believed it for a single day since." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded piece of parchment, worn from handling. "It took months, but my most trusted guards finally found proof. The letters used against you were forged. The seal was copied from an old document stolen from my private study. Someone within these very walls wanted you gone, Elira, and they wanted it badly enough to steal your name and your honor to do it." The hall had gone utterly silent now. Even Vashti had gone pale, her earlier confidence draining from her face. "Who?" Elira whispered. Draven rose to his feet, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a king delivering judgment. "The investigation led to 3 names. Advisors within my own council, working alongside someone who stood to gain the most from your absence." His eyes moved, slow and deliberate, to Lady Vashti. Vashti opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to deny it, but nothing came out. The color had drained so completely from her face that she looked almost ill. "Guards," Draven said calmly, without raising his voice, "escort Lady Vashti and her associates to the West Tower. They will answer for what they have done." 2 guards stepped forward immediately, moving toward Vashti, who began to stammer excuses that no one in the hall seemed inclined to believe anymore. She was led away, her crimson gown trailing behind her like a fading flame, the crowd parting for her just as they had parted for the king moments before, though this time no one whispered in sympathy. When she was gone, Draven turned back to Elira. The hardness in his expression melted away, replaced by something gentler, something that made Elira's breath catch in her throat. "I am sorry," he said, quiet enough now that it felt as though only she could hear it, though his words still carried in the silent hall. "I am sorry it took me this long to find the truth. I am sorry you were made to suffer alone, to carry our child alone, believing I had abandoned you." Elira's eyes filled with tears at last, tears she had held back through months of hiding, and now through the humiliation of the ball. "I did not know what to believe," she admitted. "I thought perhaps you no longer wanted me, that perhaps this was easier than telling me yourself." "Never," Draven said, and the word rang through the hall with quiet force. "There has never been a day, not one single day, when I did not want you, when I did not think of you. You are not just someone I chose once, Elira. You are the only one I have ever wanted to stand beside me, now and always." He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers, where it rested on the curve of her belly. The gesture was simple, but the meaning behind it was unmistakable to everyone watching. This was no stranger's child. This was his. "This child," he said, loud enough now for the entire hall to hear, "is my heir. And this woman," his eyes never left hers, "is my true mate, chosen not for politics, not for convenience, but because my heart has never once wavered from her." He leaned down then, and before the entire court, he claimed her again, a bond renewed in front of witnesses who only minutes ago had mocked her without mercy. It was a moment both tender and powerful, a public declaration that could not be undone or denied by anyone in that hall. When he straightened, he turned to face the crowd, his arm now settled protectively around Elira's shoulders. "Let it be known," he said, his voice carrying the full authority of a king, "that Elira is to be treated with the honor and respect owed to the future queen of this kingdom. Anyone who speaks against her, who spreads lies about her character or her child, will answer to me directly." The hall, which only moments before had rippled with cruel laughter, now filled with a very different sound. Slowly, one by one, nobles began to bow, some out of genuine respect, having seen the truth revealed before them, others perhaps out of fear, understanding now the price of crossing their king. But whatever their reasons, the bows came, spreading through the hall like a wave, until every person present had lowered their head to the woman they had mocked only minutes before. Elira stood in the circle of Draven's arm, overwhelmed by the sudden shift, by the months of pain finally giving way to something like peace. She looked up at him, and he looked down at her, with an expression so full of warmth that she nearly forgot the hundreds of eyes still watching them. "Come," he said softly, extending his hand to her. "Let me take you somewhere you can rest. You have carried enough weight alone tonight, and for far too long before it." She placed her hand in his, and together they walked from the great hall, past nobles who now watched with quiet respect instead of scorn, past the empty space where Vashti had once stood so confidently. The doors closed behind them, leaving the ball to continue in hushed, astonished murmurs. Later that night, Draven led Elira out onto the palace balcony, overlooking the moonlit gardens below. The air was cool and quiet, a sharp contrast to the noise and tension of the hall they had left behind. "I never stopped believing you would come back to me," Draven said, standing beside her as she rested her hands on the stone railing. "Even when I did not know where you were, even when I feared the worst, some part of me always knew our story was not finished." Elira smiled, the first real smile she had allowed herself in months. "I almost did not come tonight. I was so afraid of what they would say, what they would think." "You were braver than any noble in that hall," Draven said, turning to face her fully. "You stood alone against all of them, and you did not run. That takes more strength than most people will ever know." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her as though he intended never to let her go again. Below them, the gardens glowed silver under the moonlight, and somewhere in the castle, whispers of the night's events were already spreading, though now they carried a very different meaning than before. The kingdom would talk about this night for years to come, not as the night the Omega was mocked, but as the night their king proved that truth and love could rise above cruelty and lies. Elira rested her head against Draven's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that everything would finally be all right. Their child would be born into a kingdom that knew the truth, and Elira would never again have to stand alone.